Hey everyone, I'm Nico and this is the last of 3 tutorials for the Iron Maiden classic, The Trooper. So in the first one we looked at all of the rhythm guitar parts, the second one was a lick-by-lick tutorial of Adrian Smith's solo, and finally we're gonna look at Dave Murray's solo step by step as well. Like Adrian's solo, I think this is a good one for advanced beginners to learn because most of it is not particularly difficult in terms of technique. But there are a few spots that will require a little more work for you to really nail them down. And at the same time, there are some advanced principles involved that make this an excellent solo for more experienced players to study as well. And as always, I'm going to break this one down into smaller sections. I think it's the best way to approach learning a solo as it's more manageable and it gives you a better understanding of how the different licks and phrases work together. And just a quick word about what's going on musically. So Adrian's solo was in E minor, as is the rest of the song, but for Dave's solo, there is a modulation to the key of A minor. The rhythm part is playing the same chord progression, only in this key it's A, G, E, 4 beats each, and then F and G for 2 beats each. So again, we have a 4-bar pattern that is repeated 4 times for a total of 16 bars. For the solo, Dave is using the A minor hexatonic scale, which is basically a pentatonic, but you add the second, which in this case is the note B. And that opens up more melodic possibilities. He also throws in 2 chromatics to keep things interesting. Dave is a very fluid player, and that's so evident here as he's playing in 5 different positions, continually moving up the fretboard as the solo develops. So he starts here, then he moves up here, then here, and he ends it up here. The great thing about this solo is that it has a very memorable opening lick and an equally memorable closing lick. Both are actually very simple, but their impact is absolutely huge. So the opening lick goes like this. So you have 2 symmetrical trills on the first and second string that are preceded by a quick 16th note hammer-on the upbeat of the previous measure. And then they're followed by a bar of descending 8th notes and another bar of 2 descending low notes with slides. So let's look at that slowly. So he starts hard and then lets the music breathe with those very loose and relaxed low notes before moving on to the next part. And notice how Dave seamlessly alternates between a staccato and legato feel in that 8th note descending line. Now the next part is all trills, and they're phrased in a way that gives a sense of rushing forward, almost to the point of losing control. Except he knows exactly what he's doing, as this is kind of a Dave Murray signature. So it goes something like this. So like the first lick, he starts with 2 quick 16th notes on the upbeat of 4, and for the first 2 trills, you pick the first note and then do a hammer-on and pull-off 3 times. And for the next 3, you pick the first note, then hammer-on and pull-off only twice. And notice that there's a slight pause between the first of these 3 shorter trills. And the way he ends this phrase is somewhere in between a rake and a sweep. Now this next lick can be a bit tricky to reproduce, and that's mainly because there's a very natural and spontaneous flow to it, rather than something very neatly structured. And I've heard a fair bit of live versions of this song, even going back to 1983, and I haven't ever heard Dave play this part of the solo like the record. So I'm going to explain it as closely as possible to a note for note kind of thing, but when you approach this lick, I recommend you prioritize the flow and the feel rather than the individual notes. It starts with some random pick strokes on the first string over the 12th fret, almost like winding up for the lick over the end of the previous measure. And then the lick starts like this. And then it continues with a similar thing on the B and G strings at the 15th and 17th frets. So the whole thing goes like this. And see how that's got a very liquid kind of feel? Reminds me a little bit of Jimi Hendrix. So you want to keep your hands loose and relaxed, and you want to stay just a hint behind the beat on this part. So now let me do that slowly for you. And he closes that lick with a dive on the 12th fret of the G string, followed by a whole step bend at the 13th fret of the B string. So you dive and pull the bar back up in a controlled movement, and when you're back at the top, you hit the bend. And now that takes us to that super cool lick that I really wish Dave would play again live, because it's such an awesome way to end the solo. So that's a lot of bending, and that last one might be a little bit more challenging if you've never done this kind of thing. So it's a simple technique, but it just takes a little practice. The idea is to bend up on one string while rolling your finger a bit so that you meet the lower adjacent string. And then switch your finger to the lower string at the top of the bend. Pick that note, and then come down gradually on the lower string. And this is yet another Hendrixy moment, but Dave adds a little extra bit of coolness by picking the G string again on the way down, this time one fret lower. And he also throws in a quick little bend and release to end the solo. So let me play the whole lick again for you slowly. And that's the whole thing. So again, I really want to reiterate that I don't think this is a solo that needs to be played note for note, as the spontaneity of the execution is a very important element of how the solo sounds and feels. Dave Murray himself only ever follows the main idea of it and then lets the rest of the solo go wherever it wants to on any given night. But at the same time, I do think that this is a great way to learn about phrasing and how to structure a solo. And also, those little subtleties, like that last lick, are really cool to study and analyze, because it helps us understand a little bit better what it is about these classic songs that made them so important and memorable to millions of people from everywhere in the world, even across generations. So I hope you enjoyed this. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.